Alright. For entertainment and educational purposes only. Thank you for adding that in, Cosmic. So yes, tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about the different kinds of food types that I've noticed they, see in the wild, and some of the stuff that they, you know, take from us, as it were. Yeah, and they do some dumpster diving, that's very true. Bad pup. Alrighty. Hey Phil, how you guys doing? Yeah, some of them might eat bulrush roots. They eat cattail roots up here. Yeah, there are quite a few plants and whatnot that we don't know about. So let's get into some of the stuff that I've run across and how I run across them. When I talk about a food type or what I think might be one of their sources, I make sure that I find at least three other things in the area. You know, a foot track, kana, snap stick, something auditory, a call, tapping. You know, some evidence to make sure that there is actually a cryptid in the area foraging. And then, it was gathered in a standard foraging manner, a pattern that they use. And then I will start counting those kinds of food types in. So, without going into my old notes from like 2009, I'm going to go ahead and read out what I have, what I could remember off the top of my head. And some of these food types are actually going to be specific to species and or race, because there are just some things that are more prevalently taken by some of these guys than others. So crawfish, for instance, is eaten by Gugway a lot, and dogmen will also eat crawfish, but they also both like to dumpster dive. Dogmen will also take bear, but standard stuff is be smaller than that. Typically, at least it has been in this area. Deer is about the largest thing I've seen taken in this area. Washington, I did find what I think was the remnants of elk, but there wasn't enough of the carcass left to be sure. I knew it was large, put it that way. It could have been moose, just depended. I don't have the bone expertise per se for that without finding a head. Deer, frog, small birds, mountain goats, lizards, geese, snakes, ducks, herons, especially the squab. They love the squab for some reason. They take those out of the nest a lot, just like ducks and geese. They'll take the young ones first before they'll take a mating pair. In times of drought, they'll get into eating grasshoppers like Native Americans did. Uh, Turkey, pheasant, worms, raptor squabs. For some reason, they like raptor squabs. It doesn't matter if it's if it's an eagle squab or a crow, or not crow, hawk or falcon squab. Though they do seem to favor falcon squab, unfortunately. So those are some of the, I would assume, a delicacy if they're going after that sort of thing. Might have to do with concepts of food being medicine, and imagery is everything in those cases. Let's see, we're raptor squabs, termites, the little ones eat a lot of termites, doves, pigeons, rabbits. I've even found turtles in some areas taken, tanagers. The first time I ever found a tanager that was probably collected, I actually got hit in the side of the head with a rock because I snuck up on a juvenile. A creek bed, and then I heard a sudden rush of movement. Not like a deer, because a deer will bounce through the bushes and you'll hear this as it goes. No, it was just a like something was going after, more like a cat, like something was going after something. So that got my curiosity. I went down and I checked, because it was only 15, 20 feet down from where I was traversing through. and I got pegged in the side of the head with about a golf ball sized rock. That hurt like a. But then I noticed a tanager, and I was tanagers are yellow birds with red head or orangish red heads. They're really a beautiful bird. That's common here in the Northwest. Well, used to be more common than it is now. So as I was kneeling down, another rock went over my head, and it was a much larger rock. It was probably softball sized. And then when I stood up, I got another rather large, softball sized rock lobbed at me at pretty much a flat trajectory. I got out of that thing's way. So yeah, if you sneak up by accident, or if you're too close to a hunter, they might think you are there to steal their food, and they will probably try to club you in the head with a rock from short or long distance. So keep that in mind. So that was my experience trying to collect the evidence of the tanager being taken. And crows. I've seen crows killed a lot in their areas, but I don't always see them taken. So I don't know exactly what's up with that. I don't know if it's because it's a bird that alarms too much, potentially. Um, Jen, when she was first on our mink ranch, killed about 10 of our mink, and it was because they were screaming at her. So it might be crows' deaths might be connected to that sort of behavior. It warns too much. The Bigfoot doesn't like that. Make sure that animal's dispatched so it doesn't tattle you out. I don't know, but it's something to observe. I have found some evidence that it'll take a beaver, but they only usually eat the tail. I'm not sure why. Probably because the tail maybe tastes like bacon, because that's what I've been told. I've never had beaver tail, but my dad, who used to trap, and when it was still legal to do these sorts of things, he had tried beaver tail. He said it was much like bacon. Muskrat young, they get taken a lot. I mean, muskrats will have 6, 8, 12 babies in the ponds around here that have, fair woman's area. You hardly ever see a muskrat baby. And if you do, the individual only has like 2 or 3, which is not normal because they breed. And muskrats are another one of those critters that breeds repeatedly throughout the year. So a muskrat will have 3, 4 litters in a year, kind of like rabbits and rats and every other, little thing like that breeds multiple times. Domestic dogs, domestic cats. Unfortunately, I have seen that. Squirrels, wolves, rats, mice, fish. In fact, some fish will even ask for by specific name. I have seen kanji laid down for trout, kanji laid down for salmon. So they can identify the type of fish they want, not just, sucker fish or a catfish or whatnot, bottom fish. And I've also seen kind laid down for catfish. So they'll actually ask for specific fish types if they're doing trades. Freshwater clams, I've also seen them take saltwater clams. Mussels, freshwater and salt. Oysters. Sun-faced people, which basically look kind of like a round-headed Bigfoot, but they've got fair skin like us to kind of a sunburnt look to them. They'll eat horses. Then you get into the, vegetation that they take. So that's quite a few protein items, and it actually kind of balances out in their overall, food type to how much they gather. It's actually very similar to our eating patterns. Not quite as similar to some primate patterns, though. Primates usually don't eat as much protein. So that was an interesting thing to learn. So getting into the vegetation side. Iris roots, which we cannot eat, they can. So can greater apes. That's a thing that they have in common. But Bigfoot have to soak the iris root for 24 hours before they eat it. They have to detoxify it. And sometimes you'll find those roots sitting in a wash point in a river, so that they are, you know, being washed and diluted of their toxins. Uh, that's a good one to find. I've got pictures of some of that sort of thing from Washington. Cattails, especially the roots, choke cherries, uh, berries and roots, they'll take both. Salmon berries, and they'll take the stems between the larger leaf and the limb or stalk that it grows on. Mountain currants, they'll also take the berries and roots from those. Elderberries and the stems going to the leaves, they'll take those. Blackberries and the stem stalks, they'll eat the pith out of the stem stalks from blackberries. Jen used to do that a lot. That's something, a feeding behavior that's similar to gorillas. Let's see, gooseberries, blueberries, apples, pears, grapes, cherries, sallow. The sun-faced people eat a lot of sallow, and there's even stories about them eating sumac. But I don't know, I haven't seen that one other than disturbance on sumac plants. It was just like, well, Rose hips, especially the wild hellebore up here in the northwest, they really love that stuff. Mustard flowers, honeysuckle flowers, violet flowers, and then you get into things like fennel and fennel bulbs and fennel flowers. They'll also take the fennel seeds. Fern bulbs and fern fiddles, those are two things they really go after a lot here. And then you get into mushrooms, and the types of mushrooms that are edible that I've seen disturbed are chicken of the woods, hogheads, uh, chanterelles, and black jellies, and then some of the woody mushrooms that they're edible, but they taste like wood. Camas bulbs, cycla bulbs. I don't know how they handle the cycla bulbs because we can't eat cycla. That's poisonous to us, but may not be to them. Gugway, yeah, gugway are bald-headed, look very humanoid in the face. They have charcoal skin and black hair all over their bodies. They have slightly more expressed canines, uh, claws on their hands and feet, so they're kind of barefooted. Uh, but they're people eaters. Oh, and they also have, instead of like the Guanche, Oma, Yer, and Skookum that have whites to their eyes, Gugway have blacks to their eyes, like the lowland booger people. So those are a couple of differences that are more like primate. But the Gugway looks very, 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 very human in the face. Doesn't look like a primate at all in the face. And its ears are very much like ours as well. The only difference is they have slightly more distended canines. Let's see, where was I? So we're getting into some of the other foliage. Dandelion flowers, miner's lettuce, pennywort flowers, along with creeping pennywort. Those are two flower types they eat. For some reason, Dogman likes it, and he will steal it out of the cornfields in this area. Walnuts are another thing, and it doesn't matter if they're, the edible walnut or the black walnut, because English walnuts are not always considered tasty, but they will eat both, along with filberts, pine nuts, cranberries, chestnuts, and the dock plant. And then some of the human foods that I was able to either introduce to Jen or that I've used to, gift food to certain groups so I can get a little closer to them. Watermelon, muskmelon, honeydew, pumpkin, cheese, peanut butter, carrots, celery with peanut butter in it, breads, herb breads and cheese breads. I seem to like both of those. Don't always take them. And I found one, and no, I didn't originally give the individual this particular item, but Went out into the national forest here and I found a juvenile that likes sea salt vinegar potato chips. And I can track him because he drags the bags of chips with him everywhere he goes. And that's how I originally found him. He was going after some chips that had been left behind in the area I'd pulled into camp in. Um, yeah, and then I watched for the next 2, 3 days. I watched that bag get drug all over the area. Like it was on one side of the creek one day, and it'd be 40 feet down in the bushes the next day, and 40 feet up the creek the following day. So he drugged that thing everywhere. And then when I was a kid, I tried Gen on some different foods too. Christmas time, I gave her Brazil nuts and macadamia nuts and cashews, and she ate all of those. Uh, and peanuts, that sort of thing. Chocolate is another item they seem to like if they're going to be raiding stuff from us. Um, Jerky, my mom used to always carry jerky and summer sausage when she was doing trades with them. And some of the vegetables that Jen would want out of our garden were kohlrabi and sweet peas, the peas that you can eat in the husk, because the whole thing's a soft sweet pea. And then there are some leaves that I've noticed and some saps that they'll collect that are probably food or medicinal, and those would be locust leaves, aspen leaves, and I've seen alder sap being collected, including putting a peg in a tree. I found a tree up in Washington that had been pegged with a wooden peg. And then when you get into the dumpster diving stuff, the things I've seen in cities or between cities, oddball things that I've found that, I've tracked while tracking an individual, I come across this sort of stuff every once in a while. It'll be like a hamburger package or a burrito package, like a restaurant style burrito, where it's wrapped in tin. I'll find sandwich bags left behind that have muddy fingerprints on them that are way too big for human. Um, Salads that have meat in them, chips, candy, pies. I found a pie tin where something had licked the pie tin and had a 4-inch wide tongue. Donuts, and then, wintertime roast turkeys and hams get taken a lot because you'll find that sort of evidence up in the woods where it's been drugged too. So those are just a few of the food items that could potentially be dietary items for different kinds of cryptids. I think most of that sort of thing's being collected by, Guanche, Oma, Skakkum, Yaren. Those are the pretty mm, average cryptid that we get in these areas. So let me go back up to questions. Yeah, in fact, there is a picture, a really good picture of a gugway that's floating around somebody's research area. And you can see him. Okay, he's got the bald head. He's peeking up over the top of a log. You can see like the top part of his head to about here on his nose. He's got a cut mark across his nose, and the very, extremely human-looking eyes. And that cut mark across his nose, that's an indication when they take a wedge out of the bridge of your nose. That means that particular Gugway had been kicked out of a society. He's been kicked out of his group, most likely, and marked because he went after maybe a child or a woman in an inappropriate way, or was eating people, because they kick him out for all of those kinds of behaviors. So if you are interacting with what you think is a Bigfoot and it's got any kind of oddball, scar across his nose, a cut across his forehead, cut across his cheek, a notch out of its nose, a notch out of its ear, a notch out of the bridge of its nose, anything like that, you might be dealing with a shunned individual. which means they've been bad in society and they cannot be trusted. So be really careful if you have a cryptid in your research area that has any kind of scars on its face that don't look like, normal bite marks or anything from an animal. If it looks like a knife cut, or a glass knife cut, you might be dealing with one that has been cast out and potentially more dangerous than you might want to deal with. I haven't noticed them fermenting stuff or trying to ferment things, Ben, before eating it. But there was one individual up in Washington that I tracked for a while, the one that liked to take beer off of the beach. If anybody left beer behind, and he'd take booze bottles too, he'd try to ferment stuff in the bottles. So he would put vegetation in after leaving, some alcohol in the bottle. He'd add like mosses or fern stems, stuff like that, and he would add a little uh, moisture to it, and then he'd cork it. So he was trying to ferment to a degree, but probably didn't have the understanding of what goes, what the process is and what he has to go through to actually ferment stuff. But he was experimenting with it in a rudimentary way. And, the ancient Romans, they had a form of fermented grain that was just always fermenting. So if they figured out to use grain, he'd probably had much more success. But he was still trying to ferment some plant material that he thought smelled like the booze, most likely. Black Tingeon really loved black jellies, for instance. Should go after those over almost any other thing. Yeah, elderberries are great. Okay, Cosmic Gugway looks humanish, so they look more monkey-like. Wow, yeah, they do, and they have the peculiarity of the whole claws instead of toenails and fingernails, which was very weird for me to experience when I was younger. I'd look at that thing and go, okay, it's got some differences. It looks very human, but at the same time, it don't look anything like Gen Gen. So it was a very weird thing to see that close. Yep, chestnuts. I found husk chestnuts 20, 30 at a time in some locations. And then also, I know people in this area, and I ran into people up north in Washington that would have, complete plants stripped. A pear tree would be completely stripped, or an apple tree, or a grapevine would be completely stripped in one night. And when that kind of behavior goes on, it makes me wonder if they're storing stuff. Because I have found storage locations. I found stumps that are storage locations, and I have found items at times in the storage locations. Sometimes it's nuts, sometimes it's dried berries, sometimes it's old fruit. It just depends. So there's also the possibility that they are storing and drying by just natural process. I don't think it's an intentional process. I think it's just they're probably storing the fruit. And if it manages to dry and not go bad and soft, then, they end up with extra stored food for the winter. But they do seem to store foods. It's not real long term. It's more 2, 3 months max preparatory kind of thing, but they don't all do it. But it is a behavior that you can find in Guantanamo areas. I'm pretty sure that Skookum and Yarn probably also do some similar behaviors like that, building little ground refrigerators or putting food in stumps or in hollow logs, that sort of thing. So there's also the potential to discover them and kind of by where they store their food. Yeah, they do seem to have a lot of medicinal plants too, Cosmic, that they collect. But I didn't really put in the medicinal plants because this is more just focusing on what they might be able to, you know, the fact that they do eat some items that are only good for primates to eat, which kind of indicates they still have a working appendix. Bad pup. Found footage of two Japanese men lost in deep woods. Video of Gugway. Ooh, wow. I would love to see that. Cosmic, lots of foods, herbs, roots. Yep. You had a dozen freaking Gugway watching you, Phil. My God, don't hunt in those areas. Get the hell out of there. Those fuckers can be not good. They eat people sometimes. Be careful, please. Okay. Oh yeah, leaves. I've seen them take aspen, locust leaves. Every once in a while they'll take, there's a five-pronged leaf that they'll take too. I want to, not elderberry. It's like a chestnut leaf if I remember right. It's a five-pronged leaf. I'll have to go back through and check my notes. But these are the things I could remember off the top of my head. I think it's just locust and aspen. Aspen you can use as a painkiller. It's got, what, aspartame or something in it, if I remember right. And a couple of other enzymes that are soothing, I guess. You know, that work as a pain relief. Bad pop leaves, tree bark, like pine, shrooms. Yeah. Yeah, I've also seen them take inner material from like alder bark. And I've also seen them take sap from an alder bark tree. So the soft inner red bark of an alder can be boiled and turned into a tea. That's good for treating things like, influenza, consumption, that sort of thing. Oh, that was the other thing I've noticed. They will take the roots of Oregon grape as a medicine because I've seen the digging of the roots, and I know that that can be used to cure, cold-like symptoms. You gotta boil it again. Ben, I thought of fermenting as had overwintering food strategy. Yeah, that would be a good one because it's something that we've utilized, but I don't know if they make vinegar. You kind of have to be able to make uh, another product or two before you can do food fermenting, or you have to have some, progenitor yeast that'll do it. Like around turtle ponds, you can get the right kind of yeast to ferment meat, but you can't do that elsewhere because the enzymes are not correct in the ground to do that. Uh, so, different yeasts in different parts of the foraging area would have to be discovered and utilized. And I don't know if they understand, wild yeasts. They'll pinus. That's a biggie with them. Big on turpentines. Yeah, I believe that. Although turpentines come from witch hazel trees, right? Also seen them collect flowers off of witch hazel. Well, I don't know, Bad Pup, what they would do if they came up on their distillery in the woods. But there have been some interesting stories. Bad Pup can Sasquatch detect when a person's sick or has a disease? Um, I think they can kind of understand what an illness is because they get sick kind of like we do. So there's a possibility. I know that when I got sick as a kid, that Jen Jen would, she started checking on me. She'd look through my window, see if I was okay the first, week or two. And then she continued as I continued to stay sick for 8, 9 months. She'd still come to my window. So I think she recognized there was something going on. Bad pup, do they hide deer or food and eat it later? To some degree, but it doesn't seem to be a very long storage process for perishables. They'll either share the meal with everybody in the family, or they'll finish it by the next night or two after that. So if they have taken a deer and they don't eat the entire deer the first night, it will be eaten within a day or two because they don't eat rotten food. Most of them, like us, they'll get sick. So it's kind of quick process out there in the woods. You can't really let stuff go for more than a day or two because you got perishable time on it. Well, if they were guanche and not gugwe, if they were guanche, they would have cone-shaped heads like a gorilla. They'd have short black hair all over their bodies. They'd have a gorilla-like face with a human-like nose that turns down, that has extra crenellations in the side of their nostrils like a hyena, spotted hyena, and an extra fold of skin, which is what they look like close up if they were guanche. So you'd have the cone head, you'd have the ears laid back against the head like ours. They'd have that very gorilla-like face with kind of more, mouth structure and nose structure a little more human, except they've got this very unusual nose apparatus to the side of their intake holes, as it were. If it's Gugway, it's going to look very human. It's going to have a round-topped head, not a conical head, and it will have a ruff of longer hair around the backside of its ears and down across its neck, but they don't look anything alike. You know, the Gugway looks very human in the face, has very black charcoal skin. The Guanche has gray skin more like a normal gorilla's coloration. Um, Guanche don't have claws, they have fingernails. Gugwe have claws. Guanche don't have longer distended canines. Gugwe do. So, some details that way will tell you which one you were looking at, Phil. Bad pup, I can't find the Gugwe bid, but I'll try. It was 6 years ago I saw it. Oh, wow. Yeah. There's one picture floating around. I just got like the enlarged eyes, but I didn't get the rest of the image with the top of the head. I've been wanting to talk about it, but if I can find it, I can find it. If I can't, I can't. Ben, not sure where I read this, that they store food at high elevations in ice and snow. Yeah, I've seen that in Central Oregon too. Sun-faced people will store food items in the snow. They'll let stuff freeze in the snow. So that's a good possibility there, Ben, because I've seen some of that behavior myself. And that was during my turnout when I was a teenager. Okay, bad pup, baldish, big heads with sprigs of long, dark, coarse hair. Yeah, the hair on the gugway is about 4 inches long, and the overall body hair looks more like that of a chimpanzee on the gugway, whereas the hair on both guanche and oma is very short. It's real close to their bodies. It's maybe 2 inches in length. So the guanche and oma have a very slick, peltish looking coat to them, more like a mink, because they do have guard hairs and undercoat like a pelt, whereas the gugway, it has a more chimpanzee hair structure, except for the longer ruff of human-like hair they can grow, you know, from like their ears down. The tops of their heads always seem to be bald. My grandmother's stories also indicated that they're born bald and they never are able to grow hair. So I'm assuming that's their natural look. The one that I saw up close for 9 months definitely didn't have any hair on its head except for a little bit that was just kind of extra fluff. But no, he didn't really have any hair on the top of his head. It's all ears and below. Baldish big head with sprigs of long coarse hair. Yes, that I heard too. Can detect never sound healing through spine. Well, um, I don't really get into the whole telepathy thing because I think that's just infrasound, and I never experienced any telepathy from uh, Jen Jen when I was a kid. Um, she spoke, and I don't think it's doing any justice to them if we're putting stuff on them that we we haven't even proven that they exist yet. And you just keep throwing them back into the myth cycle. It'll just make it even that much harder to try to do anything to assist them, help them, proof them, etc. Uh, I haven't had any experiences with spaceships, telepathy, or anything like that. Nor is this channel about that. This channel is actually about me trying to give you some evidence that I've done some research on, some history and lore that comes from my family's background as natives, and the things that we understand about them, not the things that are mythically thought about them today. So keep that in mind when you're on my channel, please. Yeah, they do have very dark skinned. Very true on that one. Okay. And wonder if they are attracted to mineral X like a lot of other forest dwellers. Salt. Yeah, I used to take a rabbit lick to Jen Jen. Um, she didn't really like it. It was too salty. She'd lick it if I insisted, but it wasn't something she went after or sought out. Okay, Phil, I saw two juveniles when I was about 10-ish. One had tan skin, the other black skin. I think they were siblings. Interesting. That would mean that one of the parents was potentially a sun-faced person that had tan skin. Or another one of the species that is fairer skin, because there are also some other cryptids out there that act kind of like the sun-based people. They're supposed to be shorter. They're very definitely cannibals, supposedly. They have black hair that they can grow long on their heads. They don't have as much body hair, and they have very tan skin, from what the stories say. But I have never found one to take a picture of, so I don't talk about them because I don't have any visual proof yet. And I don't know much about them. I have my grandmother's stories and a little bit of the tribal lore, and I haven't tracked them, so I personally I don't feel I have the right to say much about them. Okay, Bad Pop can Squatch help us find gold, gems, minerals, etc. I doubt that they would bother to show us how to do that since they use minerals and gold to trade with. I don't think they would bother to show us where their mines are or how they do their gold collection process. How do I know it was infrasound? Because the one instance of supposed mind speak seemed very much like words written on another sound wave, infrasound, bounced through a basement. So to me, if you are getting talking at distance, it's potentially words being written on an infrasound wave. Besides, there isn't anything in our science that that can even track that sort of thing. So I'm not willing to go off on that end, especially since Jen Jen never spoke in my head. She used her voice and she talked. Maybe it was just because she never had a need to use mental telepathy, but then Guanch didn't use mental telepathy with me either. Um, they've always just spoken. So I have zero experience in my mindset with that sort of thing. It, and I haven't experienced it with any of the other Bigfoot cryptids that I've been around, all up and down the West Coast. Never run into any of that stuff. There might be some localized things in some certain areas, but it's not been in my experience. And this is not about going with the modern flow. This is just about giving out information that has been hereditarily handed down, and giving some insights by the things that I've taught and the ways I go into an area and learn about them, because I am trying to fit the native lore to the different cryptid. Um, and there aren't any stories in native lore either about them hopping in and out of spaceships or being telepathic that I'm aware of. I mean, some tribes might have some unusual stories that way, but that wasn't part of the native stories that I was taught. My grandmother's stories didn't get into the mythical side of things. It seemed to be very grounded. The information was more about another creature. This is what this creature does. This is where this creature lives. This is how this creature acts. This is what this creature eats. This is how they reproduce. My education was just about another creature. There was nothing fantastic or phantasmal about it, really, other than, it's a big hairy forest brother. Yeah, some of them do speak perfect English. It's kind of freaky, isn't it? Yeah, and they do use other words as well, and they can speak other languages. How long have Sabe been on, or Sasquatch been on the earth? Well, I would say that they've probably been here for a very long time. Um, Paleolithic times, probably. They don't seem to be rigged for modern life. They seem to be, you know, when Jin Jin got bit by the Gugwei, she was bit in the neck and in the uh, tricep up here on the top of her, well, in the middle of her arm. And both wounds didn't seem to have any fat layer. It looked like, a layer of skin, a layer of muscle, another layer of muscle. So we've got what, 3 or 5 layers of muscle. So I think they have 6 or 7 layers of muscle, and they definitely don't seem to have the fat layer that we have under our skin. So I'd say that they're rigged for surviving in a much harsher terrain, probably with much larger flora and fauna in it. Because they are so big, I would assume they come from very ancient times. That and, finding petrified tracks in 145 million year old bedrock suggests that they've been around at least that long. There might be modern genetic things that have happened in the last 20, 30, 40,000 years. But overall, I think they've been here at least 145 million years because there's bedrock in this area that's got freaking Bigfoot footprints in it. So at least that long. I don't know where else in the world there are tracks preserved, but, you know, wherever there's anything that can run faster than us, it's preserved in rock. Probably not a human footprint. Probably another cryptid individual. I understand that, Phil. It's the truth is something that has to be learned about these things before we do something too stupid to, and we regret it. If we were to completely make these people or animals, because we don't know what they are, I'm of the impression they are more human-like because they speak and they seem to reason and they have a lot of characteristics much like us. You know, genetically they may not be anything like us. Genetically they may be more like a primate, but intellectually they seem more human. And all of our native, my grandmother's native stories claim that they were the first people, they were the people that we came from, they were the people that we learned everything from. They're the ones that taught us how to build shelters, they're the ones that taught us how to build fire, they're the ones that taught us how to hunt and how to forage and how to trap and how to live and what medicine was and what have you. All of that supposedly was learned from cryptids. So, if we go further back in history, we don't have a real good idea of how many different kinds of humanoids were around. We don't even have a really good idea, since we only have, what, 0.5% or 1.5% or something of the fossil record. We've got very little, maybe as much as 5% of the fossil record. But 5% is like, let me draw a dot on a page. It's not a lot of physical evidence to go on. So we don't really know how far they've gone back, and we don't really know uh, how long they've been alongside us. Heck, we don't even know how long or how far back our genetics go. Uh, we're still discovering those sorts of things. One caused me great fear. Yeah, I can believe that. They can scare the living heck out of you. Yeah, I'm glad people are starting to have some positive experiences with Bigfoot too, because there's just too much muddling. If you run in fear from everything that you find out there, you'll never find the truth, for one, and you might not be running from the right thing in fear. Some of them are incredibly dangerous. Some of them are much more timid and far more forgiving than you might realize. Okay, Ben, seems like they might have been really annoying to trappers. friend in college used to trap muskrats. Yep, and nearby river for their pelts. Easy pickings. Yeah, yeah. My dad had plenty of trapper friends that had issues with different kinds of cryptid Bigfoot up and down every river that they trapped on, and every swamp or marsh that they trapped in. You know, they'd get their traps ripped up. They'd get the animals taken out of the traps. They'd get their traps bent in half and thrown in trees. Uh, it was not uncommon. And that was all the way up through the 30s. So they're just 109, well, 90 years ago, 100 years ago. There was still a lot of interactions, a lot more than we realized. If you start reading, you know, if you can get back into local repositories, start reading just newspapers from the turn of the century or just a little bit before, you're going to find a lot of unusual information of sightings, you know, people reporting incidences with Bigfoot, incidences with some sort of hairy creature. It's more common in those old newspapers than you might realize. You might have to go to a microfiche library because a lot of that stuff's been put on microfiche. But man, when you start digging through old newspapers, you find some really bizarre, you know, woman coming into town, horses scared, buggy takes off, blah, 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 blah. You know, just bizarre stuff like that's told about. There's, you know, sightings where people have found them in their property line, you know, Mr. So and so down the roadway has been harassed for months by them. Now they're getting into the cattle feed and so's property. So those kinds of reports and um, pioneer interactions were actually documented quite a bit. There wasn't really a stigma on reporting until modern times, till after the 50s, 60s. Then all of a sudden, 60s, 70s, you talk about Bigfoot, and all of a sudden you're a lunatic, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're talking out your arse, etc. But before that, um, they were written up in newspapers. They were written up as you know, interest articles, especially if they would do things like, you know, raid a social, because there was that sort of thing that happened too. You know, we might be having a big party and they would bug us, and then there'd be a big write up about that sort of behavior. Okay, Ben, he would stash trapped muskrats in our dorm room. Oh my god. Dang, Ben, I'm sorry about that. Okay. Cosmic, just what you said about how everything was learned from cryptids is actually a huge deal. I used to receive a lot of shite from idiots in the so-called community for that very thing. Yeah. No, when you start examining the native mythological cycles and the native lore and the tribal understandings, a good portion of tribes will have lore that says, hey, you know, our medicine men used to learn from the little white-headed dwarves that live in caves, or little white-headed midgets that have tan skin that live in caves, you know. Our medicine people learned from, you know, such and such a creature out in such and such a woods area. No, there's a lot of lore that suggests that, and it's still commonly known within the native cultures, some of that lore. So no, we got to back off the modern concepts and our own modern mythology thoughts and try to grasp what the natives thought about these things, because it's probably more relevant. You know, they lived with these things for at least 30,000 years here in the Americas. I think that's the oldest campsite or evidence that's been found now. What, petrified tracks or something? 30,000 years. So we've been here at least that long. And my grandmother's native lore goes back that far on the Maya side. So we were aware that you know, the Witchugi were around, the Stumblefoot people, Some of these other tribes that aren't even known of anymore, we've been around them forever. You know, the only way we're going to be able to get to any kind of a truth is to actually have some earnest study done. I mean, it's really nice that there are some people that are dedicated in this world to doing DNA research on them and keep fighting, to get that kind of information out. I think that's going to be some of the most relevant information because it'll establish, what they are, for one, and some of the newest DNA studies, suggesting that there is um, some sort of humanoid cross there or some sort of influence genetically that makes them a subvariant human or another species of human. Just more information has to be brought forward. Yeah, bad pup, that's true. The paranormal side of Squatch, like going through portals, UFO encounters, cloaking, etc., makes them like we're living in a realm, a video game of sorts. Yeah, yeah, that's true. I don't know. They're a trackable creature. I mean, uh, I follow their trails to get to their bed systems, so to me, they're just another critter. They're not. I couldn't get to their bed systems if they were flying away in spaceships. Okay, failed choice. I go into the woods regardless. It's not to do so would be a case to live. Yeah, bad pup. If one had an experience afterlife in the woods, I'd probably never go in the woods again. Yeah, that is the case. Some people do have incredibly traumatic experiences with some of these creatures. And some of them are not friendly creatures. Crawlers. We got crawlers in this area. Those aren't freaking friendly creatures. I could just imagine, if I didn't know anything about a crawler and having one of those things try to get into my tent in the middle of the night, yeah, it'd scare the living heck out of me. I mean, the one I ran across scared the living heck out of me, even though I knew kind of what it was. Still, oh, thank you. Don't want to go there. So yeah, I can imagine anybody who's not informed or given some heads up on stuff. The first time you see anything like this, it's gonna traumatize you. It really is, because they're just so freaking huge compared to us, for one, and their sounds, I mean, when they are aggravated, are really, really loud and scary. You can hear them for 3/4 of a mile, maybe a mile or more when they're really pissed off. So yeah, that I didn't know that they ever existed. And that was your first realization, is to have one of those things scream in front of you, for instance. It would permanently probably scar you. You just wouldn't you wouldn't want to go back out there. And I don't blame people who have that fear response. These things are huge. And when you realize you wouldn't be able to survive them, yeah, I don't blame people for being scared half to death. Yeah, that goes through my head every time I get close to them. Okay, is this one gonna freaking be the one that breaks me in half? God, I hope not. Cosmic, everyone has certain parts of this grand cosmic puzzle. It's important to hear people out before throwing them out with the bathwater. Yes, that's true. Very true. Uh, okay, bad pup. Yes, the elders and Indian legends include all beasts and anything that help their civilization grow. Yes, that's very true. The stories that my grandmother told about the star people interacting with the squatch, it sounded the same as us. They would abduct us. They would abduct them. They would slice us up. They'd return us in pieces. So it makes me wonder, you know, if star people are just another species coming here doing whatever the heck they do. There might be no connection other than we both might be getting predated upon by yet another species. That's possible. So I'm kind of I try to stay in the neutral to um, it's trackable until I see something. Until I see one walk the portal. Then I'll change my freaking mind because I'll have seen it with my own eyes. It's just not been my experience. There are some stories saying that they can do some unusual stuff, but I've had things explained to me in a different way. Uh, my grandmother said they don't disappear, they make you think they are gone, meaning they messed with your mind. It's not that they go anywhere, it's that they make it so your brain doesn't perceive them. She said it's their energy field that does it. She claimed that it was the way they project their aura, the way they project their chi at you is a way of stating it. Concept. So they were projecting a thought, or they were projecting an emotion, or they were projecting an energy at you that would keep you from realizing they're there. But it was something that was handed down to her as myth points, as educational understanding from other medicine people or from people who had first-hand encounters and their experience of why they couldn't see them, why they thought they couldn't see them. Because, I've messed around in that level of it too, getting real close to them and have them do the whole make themselves look like they're not there, but they are. Because the sound doesn't change. So to me, it's more like, it's not that they're going anywhere, it's that they're making you not notice them somehow. Now, if you start reading about some of the unusual people at the turn of the century and some of the stuff from up through the 60s, 70s about some of the concepts that the American government had about spies that could hide by telling your mind hypnotically they weren't there. Might be something like that too that's going on. Until there's some way we can communicate with them, until there is some way we can sit down next to them and learn exactly what they do, it's all conjecture anyway. I'd love to be able to have that understanding at ground level, but that's going to come with time. It's not anything that is going to happen anytime soon, I don't think. I mean, it'd be nice if it did, but we gotta we've got to wrap our brain around some different ways of interacting with them because the old methods aren't seeming to work. So, my avenue is just to go snake up on them, and I've been pretty successful doing that, or just being in their area enough that they get used to me enough that they get slack and they'll let me see them. They'll start, walking around or interacting or relaxing enough that they don't care that I notice them. That way I can actually get some footage of them. Okay, bad pup. Some do, some don't, but mostly among themselves because we gotta be so self-entitled and living a modern maid. I would not touch with nature. Yeah, that's very true. We live very differently than they do, and I think their mindset is a little different than ours. Their mindset is geared towards daily survival. Our mindset's geared toward I don't know daily whatever the heck our concept of daily fun is. Some people think that's work. Some people think that's video games. Some people think that's food. Some people think that's entertainment, self-entertainment in some way. So it's a mindset that puts us askew from being able to do anything out in the woods. Because a lot of us, modernly, we just don't have any experience in the woods. I screamed all I, but if you like, at the real fairy lore, it is more than that. Yeah. Phil, what's a crawler? Crawlers look like a humanoid. Uh, they're really skinny, usually bald. At least the one I ran across was bald. And the descriptions I found indicate they're bald usually. Very pale. Was unable to stand up. It looked like it had something wrong with its leg structure. So it crawled on its toes and knees and hands. They are supposedly human eaters, meaning they're cannibals. And yeah, they'll drag you away and take you into a cave and eat you. So yeah, they're a cannibaloid that doesn't have the ability to stand upright as far as I'm aware because the ligaments in their legs are too foreshortened. They have a severe disability somehow in that way, like kind of like they've been hamstrung, is the way they look when they're moving. If a person's been hamstrung, you can't stand up, and your legs just become bunched, permanently bent. So either they're genetically born that way, if they are born, because I don't know if they're born or created, as in, you know, they've been cave dwellers so long they don't have the ability to stand. That's a possibility. But they are considered cannibals. And there is one, at least one, in one of the forests around here, because I ran across it. And there's supposedly another crawler, a red-skinned crawler, out in the Oak Ridge area. I heard stories for years about it. Even my mom heard stories about them back in the 40s and 50s when she lived in Fall Creek. So there are those kinds of other cryptids in our world too that a lot of people don't realize. In fact, crawlers would probably be one of your number one critters for making you disappear in the wild because they do drag your ass off. Ah, okay. Phil, oh yeah, the bear man I saw on all fours, massive. Phil. Yeah, I'm glad that you've overcome the PTSD from your experiences. I believe a lot of people actually have probably some PTSD from running across Bigfoot in the woods. It would not be surprised at all. Yeah, there are various different types of star people. There's the grays, there's the lizard-like people, there's what we call the big fair-skinned ones, Pleiades. There's some native lore that states that the Sioux Indian comes from the Pleiades, except my grandmother said no, that was a modern concept. Came around at the turn of the century. Before that, we believed that we were the offspring of an Oma and a dogman. So, again, mythology versus lore versus reality versus can we prove it, can we figure it out, and yeah, are we going to ever accept it? Yeah, I can bet. Uh, High vibes. You're lucky to have had a grandmother who knew and talked to you about it. Yeah, I'm very lucky. And I'm also very happy because, then I can give a little bit of information back on at least a few of these creatures. And, at least let you know about the ones that I know are a little bit on the dangerous side and the ones that I'm pretty sure are more or less harmless. Uh, Dugway, Redbone people, Sunface people, The face eater, peeler, those things, they're dangerous to us. The others, no, they're more timid. They'll run away from us. Oh, in fact, the juvenile I found up in Washington who was eating candy bars, he wouldn't even take the candy bar out of the package. He was, I think, either an Oma or a Guanche, and he had this thing for Butterfingers. I'd find Butterfinger packages everywhere, and it would be in his poo. So there's also the possibility that they're learning some bad habits from us, and we're contributing to how would you say, not per se them going wrong, but our food types might actually be drawing them closer to us because we eat a lot of goodies. We eat a lot of junk food and a lot of goodies, and it seems like some of these cryptids are very attracted to sweets, for instance. Like, yeah. Okay, ice cream dolly. You probably have better sight than most people. Yeah. Well, like growing up looking for them. I mean, being on the mink ranch with Jen Jen and following her little signs and her trails, anytime I wanted to go see her, I had to go find her. Yeah, and we had almost 15 acres of property, which isn't really a lot, but we had several forests and we had a bunch of blackberries and we had a couple of open fields and lots of building cover, barn and etc. So I'd have to go find her. And I'd have to go look for her on the property. It wasn't always easy just to, oh, there it is. She's right there. I'd have to go find her. She might be up behind the barn. She might be behind the grinding room. She might be up underneath the blackberry bushes. She might be somewhere up in a tree. So I learned a lot of her behavior and where she would sit and how she would sit. 90% of their time they're on the ground. It's very rare that they're up a tree. It's very rare that they are anywhere except on the ground. So just knowing a little bit about the fact that they're always on the ground for the most part. I mean, some are more prone to being up trees. The Omaha and the Guanche have a tendency to like to tree sit. Um, I haven't seen that too much with the Yeren, but I have seen that a bit with the Skookum. So part of it is just also knowing where to look. Having been around one for what, 3.5, 4 years, 4.5 years, whatever it was. You're daily walking around, getting close to her and hanging out with her, feeding her, eating with her, etc. Sleeping next to her when you wanted to take a nap. There was more than one time I'd just lay down and lay next to her and freaking go to sleep. And she'd sit there doing her thing and not move or anything. It was just like, oh, my kid's here, okay. And so I have that insight. And when I'm out in the field, I utilize that. I know that if there's something tapping behind me, it's probably on the ground and it's probably within 40 feet. It's just a matter of turning around, hunkering down, and looking at the 3, 4 foot level. Because you can actually see a good portion of where they're at if you just sit down. You can tell where they're sitting underneath a bush, for instance, and it'll be easy to discern because you'll see their foot or a hand or part of a leg or some other tool or something that they have in front of them. Like if they're carrying their net with them, you'll see the net bundled up next to them, that sort of thing, because that's commonly. They take their nets with them. If they don't put them up somewhere dry, they'll have them with them. If they're doing any kind of fishing with a net. So there are always sorts of ways that you can look that will give you a straight line of sight to them, like knowing where their bed systems are, knowing where their sit systems are, knowing that one sit has the advantage point, looks straight into another sit. You can utilize their pathways, you can utilize their sits in order to find them. That's how I do it. I go in on their trails. I look for them at ground level. And if I notice them up a tree, then I start scouting the canopy for bent branches and roughs of branches or branches that have grown thicker on the trunk of the tree than other branches because high stress branches will grow thicker because something has been passing over them a lot. So you have to look for those characteristics in trees, and people who, trim trees, you'll understand that. You know the stress area will bulk up more than a non-growth area. So those are some characteristics that you can look for in nature that will help you delineate where they're sitting in trees or where they're sitting on the ground. And once you understand that you can sneak up on them, at ground level, you can see them, you can typically see where they're sitting. It makes things a whole heck of a lot easier for trying to get, film footage or try to do some research, trying to figure out what they do, what they eat, etc. It makes it a lot easier if you get a little bit of a visual on them. So hopefully, some of the stuff I've been pointing out will help you do that. In this summer, some of the stuff I've got to do, I've got to go kill. Can crawlers be killed? Yes, Native American stories say that crawlers are much like a human, that they supposedly have a softer body, probably because they're not as muscled. There's not as much to them. They seem to be in an incredibly emaciated state. So they supposedly are very easily killed. Uh, and I don't think it takes anything magical to do it. As far as what my grandmother explained to me is they were just, crawlers are just old tribal people or people that refuse to come out of living in caves, and they've always lived in caves, and they've become adapted to the cave living, and they have their dietary issues because of it. They cannibalize themselves inside the caves, so we're just another food source to them. And because of the habitual nature of being in small crawl hole areas, they've deformed their bodies over generations of breeding like that and living like that. At least that's what my grandmother's assumption was about them. Because we talked about, oddities like that, where she thought some of these things came from. She thought that crawlers were potentially probably more human and just never left the caves and became, inbred because of it, deformed because of it, and cannibalistic because of that. I don't know how true that is, but, that was her assumption as a native. Yeah, I don't know if they are that strong. Although, they are reported to still be able to drag you away. So they have to have at least human strength. Okay, pup, also two dogmen following hikers when a giant about 30-foot dog came out of nowhere and easily fought off the dogman. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, Ben, what would Jen Jen do if she ate something that tasted bad? Oh, I tried her on, what was it, radishes. She didn't like radishes, and she wasn't used to the taste of the radish. And she did very much like a kid would do. She started to eat the radish, and it was a shock to her taste wise. And the next thing I know, she's spitting it out and putting it on the ground. She made the kid like gesture. She didn't like it. Nah. So I would assume that is probably a common response. If they don't like something, they'll kind of do like a kid does and go, nah, I don't like it. And dump it off to the side. She kind of had the same, but not reaction to. I gave her peanut butter with honey sandwich, and it was too sweet, too much honey, and she kind of, she didn't like the taste. It was too much honey. So she did kind of a similar thing. She didn't eat the whole sandwich. And she made the, man, I don't like it kind of face. Okay, Cosmic, I've heard it's a trick of the eye. They may look weaker than cryptids, but they're actually more stronger than chimps. Can take down a lot huge cryptids, supposedly. Whoa, really? About crawlers? Huh. I have never heard that. I would be very interested to know more about that. Huh. Hmm. People here, Phil, people hear a woman screaming like being murdered. Calls of help. Help me. What is that? Those kinds of things I've been told are from crawlers. It's sort of stuff that crawlers, supposedly, crawlers do that. They'll scream for help. Some. So if you ever, my grandmother warned that in the bushes, even in the daylight, that called you by name, not to go after it, to go the other way, because she claimed it would be a creature that would grab a hold of you and not let you go. So there's that possibility. Yeah, and it is. My grandmother considered that a luring trick as well. There's also the screaming that Jen did, and that just sounded like a woman screaming bloody murder, like she was being murdered. No call for help. The word help was never utilized. It was just, really loud scream. It was to call a mate, to let other Bigfoot in the valley know that she was looking for a husband. Okay, bad papa. The mimicking ones are tricky, but could be demonic manifestations like a witch or something. Ones that mimic humans call it saying help too. Yeah, there are some Indian stories that suggest that too. That sort of thing that, could be dark shaman. Yeah, go back to the native stories. The native stories of set areas will have information concerning a particular critter and some behavior types. Uh, but you have to go to like the longhouse, you have to go to story night, you have to go listen to the native traditional stories in order to get some of that information. Could be the owl squatch, witch types. What's in Mexico called lechuza. Interesting. Up here, you just have the skookum that make the owl call at night, and they don't practice witchcraft as far as I know. They just use it as a night call to communicate with each other through. The crier, cosmic. Also, a thing in Mexico called la lorona, crier, which is most likely the same as a woman yelling for help. Oh, interesting. Hey, Lauren. Have you ever seen a kid jumping up and down trying to scare someone away? I haven't seen them jumping up and down. I've had stuff thrown at me, uh, but I haven't seen one jumping around to try to scare anything away. It's all mimicking, most likely, for luring, Cosmic says. Okay, bad pup. Any ideas? The missing 411 could be cryptids related to something else. Thousands have gone missing, most solo hikers. Well, there's some funny stuff going on in the woods. Some of it's by humans. Up on the peninsula, for instance, in Washington State, there's a lot of problems with, you know, humans practicing bizarre stuff in the woods. Has absolutely nothing to do with cryptids, but definitely has something to do with, sacrificing people. Also, a lot of that here in Oregon. So some of your 411's probably going to be just humans predating on humans. And no, thank you. There is some potential cryptid predation, but I'd say that's probably, the ones that are cannibalistic. You're probably going to run across the things like the Gugway or a shunned one, or a crawler or some other cryptid that eats people. And because there's no information out there to delineate an area like that, you could walk into a spot like that and probably be taken, and nobody be none the wiser. But then, humans would do the same thing to you. If there's somebody out there sacrificing people in the woods and you happen to be walking along and see them, I don't think they're going to let you leave, for instance. So there's that. And humans, we already know, predate on each other pretty badly. So keep that in mind. Uh, there's a lot of that goes a lot more than you might think, unfortunately. When you can watch people walk in the woods and then not come out with the same number of people, you've got a problem. And when you think, hey, you're going to go report it to the police, and the individual sitting next to you says, oh no, those people are wearing suits, your information ain't going to go anywhere even if you do call the cops, but you probably will get in trouble for it. When you've got that level of involvement of individuals making people disappear in the woods, we culturally have a problem. So there's probably a lot more going on out in the woods than we want to think about. I don't see a whole lot of it, thankfully, in my area, but yeah, there's some that I've seen. There's just too much suggestion of it, and there's too much that I've been told. Uh, there are some tribal lands that get bodies dumped on them because people have been murdered out in the woods, and they don't want to. The criminal doesn't want to leave the body where they murdered it, so they do dump it on Native American reservation land. That's not unheard of. And unfortunately, that happens a lot more than you might realize, too. In fact, some tribal lands are more or less just areas of them are used as body dumps. It's part of the reason why every Native American has their DNA sample registered. It's not to just prove that they're Native American, it's to prove they're not the murderer of what got dumped on their property. So that's a facet of modern life that we're not being told about. But the natives, unfortunately, are aware of it because it happens around their tribal lands all the time. In some tribal lands, it's far more prevalent than they want to deal with. Oh yeah, Elorona. Yeah, the witch woman. I remember my grandmother saying the Mexicans had stories about them, and South Americans had stories about that particular entity. So I think she did have a little bit of lore about it, but she saw them as a dark shaman. Okay. Yeah, I'd rather not see a crawler. I didn't want to see the one I did see. My God, that thing scared the hell out of me. Okay, bad pup. There was a military story with a giant type crawler fighting through Dogman. Could it be true? Yikes. books. I haven't heard that particular story, but I wouldn't put it past it. There's just too much stuff that the military has come across that they don't talk about. Uh, I could believe that something like that would be an encounter. Wouldn't be difficult at all to imagine that one as being true. Yeah, they are definitely creepy things, and I don't particularly ever want to run across another one. One was enough. Cosmic. Oh wow, I just possibly connected it. Missing dot. Inbred, disfigured cannibals, that they are commonly called. Feral human might be these crawlers. Yeah, yeah, I'm kind of wondering that myself too, because it just seems like with some of the stories, natives disappearing, um, back mid 1800s, if they didn't want to surrender. Some of them went underground. I know of one tribe that's still underground, and I am aware of where they are. And so far, they haven't had that crawler aspect happen to them. Uh, but if you were a smaller number, if you were only 10, 20 people that went into a cave or less, it wouldn't take that many generations for you to become severely inbred and potentially, you know, you're going to lose if you are never able to stand up, for instance, if you're born in an area where it's only 3 feet tall and you crawl around in an area that's 3 feet tall your entire life, there's a good chance you're never going to be able to stand up. You're never going to, your body will never develop that way because where you live doesn't allow you to stand. So there's that potential too, atrophication of the muscles because they can't stand up. There's no room in the caves that they live in, for instance. There's that potential or possibility. Radishes might be a big part of any root. Yeah, that's true. Well, it was peppery. It was too hot for her. She didn't like spicy stuff. Yeah, I tried her on, I can't remember what it was, something with chili. Oh, it was raisins that had chili powder and chocolate on 'em. She didn't like those either. They were too hot for her. So no spices. They don't use any kind of hot spice or mustard or anything. So any kind of anything with a bit of a temperature to it, as far as spiciness goes, they might consider to be incredibly hot, while we would consider it completely mild. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I have seen them take wild onions. Another thing I should have put on my list. I totally forgot about that. Jen Jen would occasionally collect wild onions in the filbert grove next to it. Neighbor discovered her because he caught her doing that a couple of times. And I was always trying to cover for her and telling me wasn't experiencing a dangerous creature. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you, Phil. All I'm trying to do is just share a little bit of lore and some of the understanding I've been lucky enough to figure out myself. trying to match my grandmother's lore to the different cryptids. That's really helped me kind of understand my picture a little better. Thank goodness. And once my repairs are done on my Jeep, hopefully I'll be able to do some traveling here and get some more good stuff for you because there's some locations I want to document this summer if I can get to them to do it. I think you'll find the stuff really interesting once I get it documented and put up. Uh, time to. Oh, great. Oh well. Thank you, Cosmic. I mean, we talk about this Bigfoot's eat. Yeah. So they do have a very omnivorous diet. I mean, mostly meats, fruits, and veggies. Some roots, some bulbs. A lot of it, stuff that we can eat too. So I could see how, if we were offspring of theirs, it wouldn't be a far-flung thought to consider that, yeah, they could teach us what to eat in the wild and we wouldn't die from it. And if they do use fire, which, if they're using pitch pine trees for pitch trees and they're using fatwood trees that they've burned and run hot pitch through, they're using fire starting and stuff. So, we probably learned how to build fire from them. Building structures, we just elaborated on 'em. Even the little types of traps. All we've done is just elaborated on basic stuff. The tools that they use, still very rudimentary, still very similar stuff that ancient man used. So it's to me, it's not a far step to consider. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry about that. He's caused a lot of issues with others in the past. Doesn't apologize when he's in the wrong. And some people are like that. Sorry about that, Cosmic. I'm glad you handled him. Okay. Okay, Phil. The first 85 annual mercy kills young girl and children's reward. Yikes. I didn't realize that was a troll right off the bat. Ah, okay. Duke was a troll bot. Yeah, I wondered about that. There's been some bots on this thing. Unfortunately, YouTube's not unprone to that sort of thing either. Is Ancient Duke a Smith? There are AI bots. I think humans. And the AI bots have a tendency to screw up in their lingo. Like they do lives instead of lives. Ah, okay, good idea. Bub. Bad bub. Uh, okay, I saw they don't like oranges, right? I realize I can't eat any of the pith or I get a stomach ache. Same with apple peels. Yeah, I tried one of the groups that I was interacting with up in Washington on, let's see, what did I lay out? It was oranges, sweet potatoes, and yams. Uh, they only took one half of an orange and one bite out of, I think it was a sweet potato, if I remember right. And they left those items alone. So maybe it's just a taste thing. I think citrus might be a little too much for their taste buds. It seems like Though Jen Jen ate a lot of stuff that probably tasted like dirt, it seems like their taste buds have sensitivity to too much sweet, too much hot, or too much tart or sour or anything like that. It's like it's overbearing for them, so they don't go for those kinds of items taste wise. I would imagine anything like that in the wild. There aren't in the there other than like horseradish, you don't or wild mustard, but then you'd have to grind the seeds. You don't really have a lot of stuff that's naturally hot in the edible variety of foods out there in the wild here in the Northwest, or much in that way in the United States. Seems where you grow peppers and things like that, you'd be more prone to have hotter food. But our natural wild foods don't have much of anything of a flavor to them here in the United States. A lot of stuff's pretty neutral in taste. So I would assume that any over abundance of taste would either be a draw, like the vinegar, salt, sea salt potato chips for that one. That was just a big draw for that particular individual, or it would potentially be something that would be unpleasing, would be too much for them taste wise to handle. Okay, bad pep. Okay, World Bigfoot guy is channel supposedly, but dives surely and doesn't play well with other Squatch fans. Oh, yeah, there's some of that goes on in all of this. Part of it's just people got their own opinion, and part of it's they're trying to force an opinion. I'm just trying to understand what the heck these things are and how to get closer to them. Because the only way we can ever do any research on them is if we can get close to them. If we can't get close to them, it's a mute point. Okay, do you know anything about quantum physics? Yeah, point to point quarks. I know a little bit about that sort of thing. Uh, Dolly, Phil. They apply paraffin to apples. Yes, and that is usually what happens. It makes people, because the paraffin lines your stomach, and then your stomach starts eating itself instead of digesting food. Yep. Or you can rinse it off or boil it off real quick, squelch it off in hot water, or scrub them. Yeah, that's a good way to get rid of it. I used to have a friend who was he had problems with the carnauba wax they would put on tomatoes. Oh my god, that poor guy, he had a heck of a time with the carnauba wax. So he'd always have to blanch, just skin blanch. Use tomatoes and use cucumbers just to get the carnauba wax off of them so he could eat them and not have a bad stomach reaction. Okay, bad pop, big question. Quantum physics have been around for a long time. This generation is playing catch up. You mean quantum computers? Okay, paraffin. Seen similar. How much are toxic in our? Yeah, we actually have one of the most counterfeited foods on the planet, right? Okay, but I think local Scotch hike most likely local, but some exotic food fruits, other cryptids like in Asian countries. Well, yeah, I would assume that wherever they are, they'll eat what's available. Lauren in the Flash of Beauty, thing still happening. Yes, Lauren, they're gonna be putting out the first little bit of it here, March or April, and then somewhere middle of summer, June, July, August, somewhere in there, the interview with me will be put out. But there's gonna be a little kind of preview snippet in with some other interview stuff that's coming up here in the next month or two. So it's still in progress. They're still working on it. And hopefully we'll all get to see it soon, at least this year. They have been putting out some pretty interesting stuff over there at Flash of Beauty. And I got to go to one of their lives. Very interesting stuff. I think I'm going to try to catch up to them some more. They seem to be really getting into some good grounds with people. They seem to have some really good interviews going on, and then they're releasing some really nicely made stuff. So I think it's going to be a pleasure to watch their channel. Okay, Flash Beauty has a variety. Anyone can consume their content. Yeah, they do have quite a wide berth with their field of presentment, which is nice because you can pick and choose what you want, or you can consume it all. Uh, watch about dozen Flash Beauty. Everyone's good story. Yeah. Oh well, we all have our own level of storytelling. Yeah, I'm not necessarily I'm not necessarily in the interest of just the production though. To me, I'll even watch a B flick just because it has something interesting to say. Sort of like, reading a textbook though that's drier than hell just to get the information you want out of it. Production is production. I don't, as you can tell, my channel is not about production. I'm about just giving you raw information and raw feed, and it's never gonna fucking change. Sorry, you get what you get. And the field work is going to be the same. It's going to be raw. Partly because, I don't believe in messing with the sound audio. If there's anything that's going on in the background around me, I want you to be able to hear it. And I don't think that if the subject is interesting, it really has to be a big production. Now, it should hold the interest of the individual simply because it's interesting, not because it's a big show. And, I've never been a production-minded individual. Sorry to say that. So, hey, you get what you get with me. Phil, Bigfoot is not a Gigantopithecus. Yeah, I would tend to agree. Gigantopithecus had some very serious differences than Bigfoot. And Bigfoot aren't even just one species. There's multiple different species of them. Then it would make sense that something like acorns would taste good to them more. Sensitive taste buds, we must have four tongues in comparison. Oh yeah, and I would assume that they probably eat a lot of more bland food because when you start tasting some of the stuff that they eat, you got some pretty basic tastes in a lot of the food, except for the meats, but a lot of the plants until you start getting into like the fruits, they're all pretty neutral tasting plants. It's not, dandelions are about the most flavorful out of that group, so to speak, and they're not necessarily a pleasing flavor to some people. Some people don't consider dandelions tasty; they consider them icky. So it might be a choice of tastes to some of what they do food wise. Because we notice that too. Some will will eat in preference certain items and will get upset if they don't get the same item. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Please, Phil, mention your channel. I didn't know you had a channel. I should assume that you have a channel. And actually, I wanted to encourage you and Cosmic, if you haven't been doing lives on your subject matter, about portals and what you consider the Bigfoot connection with spaceships and stuff like that. It'd be really neat if one of you guys did something like that, because you both seem to be pretty well educated in that sort of background, and it's something I don't know anything about. It would be potentially interesting to see you guys in a live. So let me know if you ever do that sort of thing. Oh, you highly recommend Dogman Encounters with Vic. Okay, cool. I'll have to check that one out. Yeah, no, I don't mind people mentioning their channel. Uh, to me, it's the only way we're ever going to be able to. We need to stop trying to hide our research. The only way we're actually going to be able to do anything about finding Bigfoot, we're going to have to share our information to some degree. We're going to have to share our understanding and at least communicate with each other instead of compete with each other. Because I don't think there's going to be any one individual that discovers them at this point. There's just too many people out in the field, for one. And without a body of behavior, if we don't sit down and we start comparing notes about the kinds of behaviors that they have and the consistency of those behaviors, then we're never going to be able to figure out how to find them. But, if we can establish some consistency with behaviors, like, they always fish, or we know that they, do certain things. They always do, pigment grinding in the fall, then there's a time you could, figure out when they're going to be in an area because of the function they're doing in the area, that sort of thing. We aren't going to be able to do much about finding them anyway. It's a good idea to sit and talk and communicate and share information so that, kind of a reference point, what to expect. Now we know they always have a snap stick in the area, for instance. Wherever they're at, you're going to find a couple of different things. You're going to find Kana, you're going to find the snap sticks, you're going to find some foraging behavior, you're going to find some sits, those kinds of things, and, probably some tracks or hair or some other thing. Those are going to be consistent. But beyond that, what's next? What's the other consistencies that we can find that will help lead us to them? Awesome. Thank you for posting that up there, Cosmic. Yeah, I'll definitely have to check out your channel, Phil. Okay, Bad Pup. Yes, I heard that name. Giganopithecus. That's the scientific classification for normies they put out for the public. Yeah, I think it's more of a diversion because they're Giganopithecus was like a gorilla. It was just a plant eater, so the diet doesn't match. And so I would assume that Giganopithecus is probably more, maybe an orang version, but still more like a gorilla. Because gorillas don't eat anything except vegetation. That's why they got the bellies they have. That's for processing all of the plant matter that they eat. And you notice that the primates that have slender builds are, you know, meat eaters, like chimpanzees. They eat a percentage of meat in their diet. About 20% of their diet's vegetation. Or not vegetation, but meat, uh, which is more than we thought previously. We originally thought it was a much smaller number of proteins that way. But, monkeys eat monkeys, for instance. So knowing those different little behaviors, dietary differences, uh, kind of rules Gigantopithecus out as a modern Bigfoot or the descendant of a modern Bigfoot, unless somehow they changed their diet completely from vegetation to omnivorous. Oh, okay. You've got quite a. You do motorcycles, huh? I used to be on a motorcycle. In fact, my mom was on a bike, and so was my grandmother. And my grandmother was riding a motorcycle back in the 20s and 30s. Yikes. Fourth is Bigfoot related. Oh, okay, cool. Right on. Has over 30 bids, 4 subs. I'm not the best storyteller. And that's okay. I don't consider myself the best storyteller either. It's just, get the story out there. That's the important part. Okay. Uh, and thanks for recommending recommendation of Flash of Beauty. So many similar channels. Good to know. Are the good ones. Yeah, I think Flash of Beauty's got an earnest heart. I think they're just trying to find the truth. They do have a few offers to help them promote themselves, which has been nice. I'm waiting to see how their future works go, because it'd be interesting to see how far they get. They seem to be very enthusiastic, and they do seem to have an earnest interest in trying to get to the truth about different cryptids. Um, where were the documentary people again? Yeah, there. A lot of them are from the Northwest. Currently in their documents, or in their documentaries, excuse me, because they're here in the Northwest. So I think some of the people are going to be from the Columbia River Gorge area, and some from Washington, Oregon area. I'm no tech either. Yeah, I'm not real up things, so I just don't do that end of it. And it's not because I don't. It's actually not because I want to, because I don't really. Um, Adding music and doing fly-ins and all that sort of thing is fine if I were building a web page, and I wanted to do that sort of presentation. But for somebody just wanting to learn how to track or you know have the sense of being there, with you in your videos. All that sort of fly-in stuff and music just distracts from the, interactions in the wild. And to me, it doesn't really help. That's why I've just decided, I'm keeping it basic. I keep it as it is. I go straight from my recordings to putting it up. I might re-record it once or twice in the area if I stammer over my words too much, but I typically don't. Usually it's one, maybe two recordings, and then I'm done and I post it. And I try to capture, something of use in the area, like vocalizations if I can, if I'm lucky enough to get that sort of thing, or knocks or taps. And I want to do more of that because the more I can build a repertoire of natural sounds and start explaining to people, oh, that's double tap, that's triple tap, that's a little growl, that's a grunt, that's an oof, that will help delineate the sounds that they make and make that easier for people to understand what they're hearing when they're out in the woods. Sort of like the difference between knowing what a gorilla's chupping sound is and, just a cough. They Bigfoot utilize a cough. Sounds very much like a human cough. It's not a gorilla chupping sound, for instance, which is more The chuffing sound is a completely different sound to a cough. It's called a cough when you're, speaking about the sounds, but it doesn't sound anything like cough. It's chuff. So those kinds of sound delineations, being able to know what they sound like at the lower volumes, because everybody goes out to get the reactionary stuff. Everybody goes out to get the screams. Everybody goes out to get the power knocks. That's not what you commonly hear. Those sorts of things are when they are pissed off, when they're aggravated, when they are wanting to scare you the hell out of an area. So it's not a real accurate read on what you're going to hear in the middle of the day, for instance, when you're trucking around in the woods and they're next to you. They're not going to roar at you in the middle of the day. It's just not going to happen. They won't because, unless you're in really, really deep woods and there is absolutely nothing else around, then they might roar at you. But typically, those behaviors are because something's wrong. And it doesn't paint a really good picture of behavior anyway. It doesn't. It represents an extreme of behavior instead of the average behavior. And what I'm trying to do with my videos is give you the average of behavior and hopefully make it a little easier to pick up the sounds that they utilize and the communications that they utilize. Because it's going to be those kinds of behaviors, things that you're going to run across the most when you're out in the woods. It isn't going to matter if you're, out to go swimming or fishing with your boat or, walk a trail for hiking or go out camping or go out hunting. You're not typically going to hear the bigger sounds until you've done something wrong, until you're already compromised, till you're already in the wrong spot. What I'm hoping to give you is what they will, how they will interact on towards you at ground level as you're going into an area, and that might be able to help you delineate if you're going into an area where they're not happy. Like you're gonna start getting oofed at, or you'll get growled at, and it might be so low and you don't realize it. I've been sitting on the ground and gotten growled at from like directly behind me, but it's such a low growl, you won't notice it. Or an oof, and get too close to one of them at you. If your ear isn't trained for hearing that and you don't notice it, you can walk by something that's already aggravated with you and you not realize it, and then you get too far into the territory and it becomes a problem because they become reactionary. It's sort of the where I want to cut that off at, is to give enough information on what the sounds are going into an area that you can hopefully learn to delineate, when you're heading into a spot that's going to be a little too dangerous, or maybe an area you should move past or go on through, or maybe even go the other direction. More what I'm after is just trying to show you what I learned, the things I was taught to listen for. When does it become dangerous? What do you listen for? What does it sound like when you've gone too far? And what happens when you're too close to a baby? What happens when you're too close to a bed system? What happens um, when you're in the wrong spot at the wrong time? That's what I want to try to give you guys so that you can have a little better handle when going out into the woods. You can tell quicker what's around you and what the reaction is, why it's there. Hopefully that would, make it less of a potential for a dangerous situation later down the path, so to speak. Okay, bad pup. So many edible things all around us. Just clueless. Lost the way. A great book in the old ways. Remedies, etc. Yeah, there's some really good books. In fact, if you guys, if any of you are in the Northwest, or any place where you've got a good natural history museum where it's got Native American stuff in it. Like the Burke Museum up in Washington, Seattle area, they actually have a really good section on the native indigenous diet. It tells about the different grains that we ate and the different plants that we collected, the fruits, berries, nuts, meats that we collected, etc. So some of that actually can help you also understand what the diet of the Bigfoot is, because a lot of their diet is very much like primitive Native Americans. We eat a lot of the same plants, it seems, and a lot of the same game. Okay, Bill. So far, other than how to hunt, reading 34 experiences, flying solo. Yeah, there's that. Yeah, how to hunt does give you a lot of basic information from people directly, which is really good. It's always nice to see that. Phil, thank you, Isa. Wow, man, these comments are helping me come to terms with the reality. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there, Phil. We just there's I'm pretty sure even more cryptids out there than I'm aware of. Because just the ones that my grandmother told me about, she told me about a couple hundred different kinds of things out there. Only five or six I've been able to confirm, but still, if those five or six are confirmable, then it makes me wonder how reality based the rest of her stories were. Probably more than I want to think about. Okay. Bad but heard of the youngest kid in Kentucky. Goblin story. Wow. Could never remember a wonderful thing. Yeah, it's hopefully this summer is going to be a little better. Hopefully, I'll be able to get further out and document some other things I haven't had a chance to document yet, because I've been mostly documenting the stuff inside the city limits and around the periphery edge of you know countryside. I haven't gotten out yet though, because there's some other things out in the deeper woods that I really want to try to document and show you guys. I have some structures and stuff that are in this area, some petrified wood that's been in the same area for 10,000 years. Okay, I also have evolved into paranormal because trying to figure out how this realm in reality really works. It's nothing like it seems, and controllers, no. Yeah, the alchemy and the magic. You do have a point there, bad pup. And there are some other things to consider. How much technology is involved in our supposed reality. That's another thing to try to wrap your being around. Okay, I've heard of Joshua Cutchins. I've read books, Bigfoot yet. Maybe you should inform him of the truth. uh, Sometimes YouTubers reach their content. Oh yeah, I know, with loud music. I don't like doing that. It seems to be more of a distraction to me. I know it's meant to advertise and it's meant to show off your product, as it were. Except I don't see the truth as a product. I just see this as me attempting to give a little teaching like I was taught, and to hopefully give a repository of information for people who do have an interest in learning to track them, or learning how to interact, or learning how to live around them. the way we may have done in the past. You know, give them an avenue for that sort of thing. And, in the future, maybe this channel will actually have for research because, I don't think anybody else has the same kind of information as I am because I don't think they were walked through it the way I was. I think that makes a huge difference. Yeah, that's very true, bad pup. Okay. Isolated. It's been pretty cold here. Yeah, it's been ice cold here. We've gotten a couple of sunny days, but man, we've got permafrost still on the top layer of the soil up on this hillside, for instance. It's still just freaking an ice cake. Yeah, this year's been really bad for snow everywhere. Well, looks like we're getting into speaking of Fae and etc. Challenging the parallels of alien abduction. Yeah, there's too many parallels with the alien abduction stuff. Uh, Irish lore and stuff. Yeah, Irish lore's got a lot of interesting stuff in it. Yeah, there have actually been a couple of people that supposedly have gotten some Fae pictures, and that's always been something that's people have been interested in since the turn of the century. Yeah, that's very true. Tons of unusual stories. It seems like the further you go back in history, the weirder the freaking stories get, too. Yeah, it actually thought it was. Oh, okay. I think I do not have any more questions, and it's been about 2 hours. So unless you guys got any more questions, I think I'm going to call it a night. I've got something early I gotta get up for. So yeah, if I run across any more food items to note this next season, I'll add them to the list. But just a bit of an overview. And counting those out, there's like 85 or 90 different food sources. So that's a pretty well-rounded diet. Uh, that's a pretty good number of plants and animals taken. Uh, I think most primates eat somewhere around 130, 120, 130 different species. So, you this is a comparable diet. I think we eat quite a few different kinds of things too, somewhere up in the hundreds of or 200s in animal and plant and vegetation type, etc., fruit types, etc., nuts, berries. So, having some idea of what they regularly eat, that also helps out. Yeah, you're welcome, everyone. I'm glad you put up with my grumpy butt. And it's good to see you guys. I'm glad you're always here for me and always have good questions. I appreciate that because it helps me rattle my bean and, maybe give me a jolt or a joggle here and there to help me get you some better information. I hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend. I appreciate you, and I'm glad you are hanging tough, and I'm glad you're enjoying my content. Because it's I just want what my family understood of them to be known. Let my grandmother's stories go on. Let my grandmother's history go on. It might be of use to us in the future. That would be awesome if it were. Anyway, everybody have a great night. I appreciate you being here, and I'm glad you're hanging like tough nails. I appreciate that. And more later. May not be doing much still this week. I'm waiting for my part to be called in. See if it's actually arrived, and try to get my Jeep fixed. Hopefully, this will be the last week I have to drag my feet, and I hope next week I'll be able to be out in the field and back to doing some recording. So, I hope this week goes well with my repair. Anyway, have a great night, everyone. I appreciate you, and remember, if you're going out in the field, it's your own risk. Be really careful around these things. No matter how friendly they might think they are, there's always a possibility you're going to run across one that's got a bad attitude or having a bad day. So be the safest you possibly can be. Keep your head on a swivel. Keep your mind, your wits about you when you're out there. If you are doing any kind of research, if they look nervous, if they look like they are aggravated, if they're making, the wrong kind of aggressive sounds, just move out of their area. Make sure to keep yourself safe. So please be careful if you're doing anything with them. Anyway, have a great evening, everyone. I really appreciate you. And if nothing else, I will see you guys again next Sunday. I have a feeling it's going to be one more week like that just because of the life factor. Maybe I can get out and do a little bit this week, but I just want to make sure my repair goes well and I don't screw my Jeep up before I get it fixed. Anyway, you have a good one. As soon as I can be out in the field again, I will be. Everyone, it's been a great evening chatting with you all, and I really appreciate you. Have a good one. Take care.